Thank you everybody for joining the Vision Health Advocacy Coalition and Prevent Blindness for tonight's webinar about the thyroid eye disease drug shortage. My name is Susan Hepworth. I'm with the Vision Health Advocacy Coalition, and I'll be hosting tonight's webinar. The agenda is as follows. I will kick it off by giving some welcome and introductory remarks. And then immediately following me, we're actually going to make a little bit of a switch in tonight's program. We're going to hear from Dr. Sara Wester on the management of thyroid eye disease and implications of a drug shortage. Dr. Wester is an associate professor of clinical ophthalmology, and she is at the Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, and she is coming to us from Miami, Florida, and you will see that she's coming to us actually from right outside of an operating room. So we're going to let Dr. Wester go first here in a few minutes so that she can get back to one of her patients who's in the operating room right now. Following Dr. Wester's remarks, we're going to hear about the patient experience from Layla Lohmann. Layla is coming to us from Dallas, Texas, and she is a thyroid eye disease patient advocate and has been experiencing the drug shortage herself. Following Layla, we will hear from Dr. Robert Popovian. Dr. Popovian is a biopharmaceutical and healthcare leader and really an expert in drug shortages. So he's going to talk to a little bit about how drug shortages actually happen, and a little bit more specifically, what is causing this particular drug shortage. Following Dr. Popovian, we'll hear a few minutes from my colleague Sara Brown at Prevent Blindness, who's co-hosting tonight's webinar. And Sara is going to be talking to us about patient advocacy and what everybody on tonight's webinar can really do to try to help inform the policymakers who are going to be making decisions about the possibility of expanding manufacturing capacity and things like that. And then following Sara, I'll give a few closing remarks, and that will end tonight's webinar. So I just have a couple of slides that I wanted to go through. The Vision Health Advocacy Coalition, who's co-hosting tonight's webinar, is an organization that promotes patient-centered policies, that make services, devices, and life-changing treatments more accessible for people with vision conditions. And then our co-host Prevent Blindness, a really great organization, it's been around for a really long time, really dedicated to improving the nation's vision and eye health by fostering access to services and treatments that patients need. So we're grateful to have Prevent Blindness with us tonight. You can connect with us on social media at visionhealthadvocacy.org and preventblindness.org. And then on Facebook and Twitter, you can just search those two organizations to find us on there. And hopefully you'll be able to connect with us on a lot of the good work that we're doing. A little bit of background about why we're here on tonight's webinar. As many of you may be aware, in mid-December, the manufacturer of the only FDA-approved treatment for thyroid eye disease, which is called teprotumumab, announced, unfortunately, that there would be a short-term supply disruption of this medication. And the reason for this is government orders that were mandated with the Defense Production Act, and that's related to the COVID-19 vaccine production. So Dr. Popovian will go into more detail on this, but I did just kind of want to give you a bit of background before we get started. The company who makes teprotumumab, which is actually Horizon Therapeutics, they have a contract manufacturer that helps them make the medication. Unfortunately, this contract manufacturer was required by the government to give up some of those manufacturing slots that it normally uses to produce teprotumumab. They had to be given away in order to produce parts for the COVID-19 vaccine. What all of this means is that many patients can no longer access this medication, and totally understandably very concerned, very frustrated, and they have a lot of questions. What we really want is for every patient to be able to access whatever therapy it is that their physician prescribes to them. But we also do want to make sure that we get as many vaccines distributed as possible. So we really want to be able to find a solution in which it is a win-win for everybody. The manufacturer has put out, so Horizon has put out a really good frequently asked question document for patients to review. And they indicated on that document that they hope that the shortage will only last through the first quarter of this year. And they also indicated that all the inventory has been shipped out to sites of care. So unfortunately, there isn't, more medication just sitting in a warehouse somewhere that could be shipped out. They did indicated that everything has been shipped out. On that frequently asked question document, they also said that they are providing frequent and real-time updates via their Facebook and Instagram accounts. And so you will see probably coming to you in the chat feature in a couple of minutes, if you haven't already, a link to view that frequently asked question document, and then also a link to follow them on Facebook for more information. But really important here, and I think Dr. Wester will talk about this, it's really important to be in contact with your physician to determine if treatment is going to be able to continue, if it's going to begin as it was scheduled, and importantly, how the condition can be managed during the shortage. So we would definitely encourage you to stay in close contact with your physician. And just know that there are organizations out there who are working to ensure that the patient voice is being elevated to policymakers and regulators so that they understand the impact that this medication has on the quality of life for those who are going through this treatment. And that obviously is a very positive impact on an otherwise kind of difficult quality of life when this disease is in its active phase. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I am going to kick it over to Dr. Wester to go ahead and get started.
Okay. Hi, I'm sorry that I'm having to do this from the operating room, but we all know patients come first. So here I am. And I'm going to try and do just a short talk talking about what do we do? What are the implications of this Tepezza drug shortage? I think I have a lot of patients that have been dealing with this. I have 10 right now that are currently having treatment interruptions. So I do have some thoughts and experience from it. And I think, as was mentioned, it's really, really important to speak to your ophthalmologist or oculoplastic surgeon if you are experiencing issues with treatment interruption and see recurrence of any of your eye symptoms. So I do want to disclose, let me see if I can move it forward. There we go. That I'm a consultant and advisor for Horizon Therapeutics, as well as Immunovant, which is doing a different research study on treatment for thyroid eye disease. So I think this case present, this is a patient of mine who has told me I could share these photos. I'll be brief because I'm really excited that Layla will be discussing her case. But I think this really highlights why this is relevant and important. This is a young woman who was basically bounced around from allergist to ophthalmologist for 4 months. And as you can see, the top picture here is how she was at baseline. And then she developed this swelling around the eyes, and then swelling actually that occurred on the surface of the eyes. That's called chemosis. So there may be some of you that have had chemosis. It can be mild where you don't really notice it, like in this picture. But when it gets bad like this, it can be very painful. It can affect the vision. And it really is something that needs to be addressed. So she even had high pressures and eventually came to see us at Bascom Palmer, where she was treated in the ER with some IV steroids, but really didn't keep her at bay because 2 days later she came back with recurrence. So then she came to see me, and at this point you can see the swelling has gotten so severe. And we had to put her at that time, this is before we had any FDA-approved treatment for thyroid eye disease, and we treated her with oral steroids, which led to improvement in that swelling. But we can see the significant side effects from oral steroids. A couple things I'll say on that, because that may come up. Some of you may need to have other treatments if you're getting a hold on your Tepezza and having side effects from that with worsening eye disease. Certainly steroids we know have side effects. They can cause stomach issues, they can cause blood sugar issues, they can cause changes to the fat in the face, what we call Cushingoid features, which is obviously not something that we want, particularly in patients with thyroid eye disease, because we already have these changes in our appearance and how we feel. So it's a really, really tough thing for patients to manage. So you can see here, and she sent me these pictures, you can see the changes in her face and the fat distribution. as well as the changes in the tissue around the eye. Luckily, with time, we see improvement in that, but you can kind of see that long-term, this is not what we wanted. You know, we see that the fat around the eyes expanded, the lids got a little droopy, we have this heavy tissue here. She needed to get a thyroidectomy. So this is not ideal. And that is, you know, kind of what we were dealing with. Eventually we did surgery. We treated her with eyelid surgery. In her case, she didn't need decompression surgery. But we did eyelid surgery still, and it was not a benign thing. I mean, she really went through many years of this, and it was a lot for the patient to manage. And she's a perfect example of kind of what we would do before. So how would this case be different now? Well, as you all know, we now have an FDA-approved medication called teprotumumab, which is a fully human monoclonal antibody against the IGF-1 receptor. And you can see here, this is the IGF-1 receptor and the TSH receptor complex. So when it binds to that, it basically stops many of the things that happen in the tissue around and behind the eye, the inflammation, the tissue expansion, and hyaluronan, which is something that pulls in water, so causes that congestion. So it really has been found both in the lab and then in phase 2 and phase 3 studies to be very, very effective at treating the bulging or the proptosis, as well as some of the inflammation that we see, the redness, the pain, the discomfort, and then also double vision. So this is how it would be different now. Now, this is a case that I have pre-treatment here. You can see that the eyes are kind of bulging. You see the redness, and he also has that chemosis, which is swelling on the surface of the eye. And we have problems with movement of the eye. This is after 4 infusions of teprotumumab, of Tepezza, significant improvement in the movement here. You can see it's really dramatic. And the bulging has improved dramatically as well. So this is just one of the cases that was not published as part of those New England Journal of Medicine articles. But just shows that kind of a typical experience that I have with this medication. As we think about it now, because we're dealing with this drug shortage, which I'll talk about in just a bit, I think it's really helpful to think back to that patient I just showed you and to look at these little charts that we have here. So you can kind of ignore the chart on the left. That's just if you don't get any treatment, what happens to the bulging of your eyes? Does it get worse? Well, most often, you know, it's going to either stay the same or get worse over time. Some patients will get a little better, but most often the tendency is for it to be the same or worsen. In the treatment group, and this is in the phase 3 study, we see they improved. Okay, these are all patients that improved. This line is the endpoint, 2 millimeters or more of improvement. They didn't all meet that line, but they all improved. And the key thing here, I think, as people are getting this therapy stopped, is to realize that some people improved really quickly. And I'll talk about my experience with that. But so some people improve really quickly. And that's fantastic, especially if we're dealing with something where some people do improve and then have to hold the therapy for a short period of time. So back to my patient here, this is before his first infusion. And actually I saw him right after his first infusion, which you all probably know is a half dose, 10 milligrams per kilogram. And he was dramatically better. So that kind of points to that same chart where we see some people that improve quite quickly. As I said, unfortunately now we have this treatment interruption. So the question is kind of what does it mean for our patients, for you guys, and what does it mean long-term? And so I'm going to go through my experience. It was mentioned, and I think it's going to be addressed a little bit more, but this is not something that the company has decided to do. This is because of the Defense Protection Act to get vaccine available, that part of the manufacturing process has been disrupted. And because the manufacturing of a biologic with teprotumumab is a biologic medication, it's not like you can just go and make more of it. Anytime you increase production, the increased production has to be approved by the FDA to make sure that it still qualifies under the same metrics of the biologic that was approved initially. So that's really important to realize. It's not like the company's not willing to make more. They need to get approval to do so to make sure it's safe for all their patients, which is really important. Right now I have 10 patients, and this is kind of at what stage my patients paused therapy or treatment was interrupted. So I have a patient who got one treatment at 10 milligrams per kilogram. He got his last treatment in December, and he is still doing great. He said right after that treatment, he was like the patient I just showed you. He had a dramatic improvement, and he's been stable. He is someone who had double vision. And so I'm really, really happy he's been stable. So I'm not doing anything right now. He doesn't need further treatment. He has no compression of the nerve or vision issues, and his double vision is actually improved and stable. One of the things that I do want to mention in light of that is thinking about how long does this medication stay in your system? Well, the half-life, or the half-life of the medication is 21 days. So that's kind of your therapeutic efficiency or effectiveness window, but we know that it stays in the system for about 3 months. So there may be, some lingering effects over time. And so I think we're going to learn a lot from this information. There is going to be post-market research done by Horizon, and this you can look up, it's available online, looking at different treatment regimens, 4 doses, 8 doses, and 12 doses. And I think we're going to see a lot from what we're finding out now with this unfortunate treatment interruption in terms of what we think that will affect. Do we need to have 8 doses in everybody? We don't know. Certainly that was showed to be the most effective, and so that is our current goal. Hold on, sorry. Then I had a couple patients who got 2 doses, again, got better, really eager to get the next dose because dealing with proptosis, it improved, but we need more improvement. And that's kind of for most of the patients that I have at 2, 3, and 4 doses. And then I have some patients who have almost completed their therapy, 5, 6, and 7 doses. And those patients have done quite well, really remarkable improvement. One of them I will mention because I think it's very interesting, actually had to hold therapy. She has other medical issues and her blood sugar was elevated. So we had to hold therapy until we could get that very well managed. So she stopped therapy for about 6 weeks. It did not hinder her at all in terms of the effect that she's had. In fact, her effect is much better than I would have thought because she's more of a chronic patient. The data is suggesting that this can work quite well in chronic patients, but she was quite chronic and very minimal activity, and she had a really good effect. So if the question comes up, well, if I stop and then I'm resuming, will it work? This case really helps me say, I'm optimistic because she is someone who certainly was not in the category of the patients that we treated in the phase 2 and phase 3 study and has had a very, very nice effect. And as soon as the treatment's available again, she's gotten 6 doses, she will get her last 2 doses. So that's kind of where my patients paused. So I think the questions come up, and we looked at some of the questions that were raised by people in advance of this webinar. Will the disruption matter? We don't know the answer to that. Certainly my plan, in the absence of patients having significant adverse effect from the medication, is to resume therapy. I don't think we need to restart at 10 milligrams per kilogram because we know that's a tolerability data point. So if you tolerate that, we can certainly go back to 20 milligrams per kilogram. The other thing to think about is the fact that we don't have issues with anti-drug antibodies. So the studies actually looked at this, our phase 2 and phase 3 studies. The phase 3 data showed that there was no issue with anti-drug antibodies. And what does that mean? It's not like if we stop it and then go back, like some other medications, your body will have built up antibodies to the medication. So I really think my course of action will be to resume the therapy on those patients that I think don't have any adverse events, which none of these patients in my cohort of 10 do, as soon as it becomes available. The second question, will time matter? It's hard to know. The longer we're without therapy, right? We just talked about the half-life. Ideally, the therapeutic time is those 21 days, but we're seeing effect, as I said, this patient in the beginning of December, he still sees that he's doing quite well from it. So I think we're going to learn a lot about how long the effectiveness really that we can see of this medication. And I think the important thing is if in that window, if during that time period, you have eye symptoms that are worsening, you have to see your ophthalmologist, whether they need to put you on steroids or tocilizumab or do surgery. We had a patient that needed to have surgery from worsening disease. This is not what we want. It's not what the patient wants. We want this medication to be available again because it's been really effective in so many patients. But most importantly, we want to save vision. And so if you have any symptoms that you think are new or you're concerned about, you should certainly call or see your oculoplastic surgeon. I do want to mention that we do have a multi-center study underway looking at the effect of this treatment interruption. So if we pool all of our data, we're trying to figure out what can we learn from this. It's an unfortunate situation, but if we can do anything, it's to learn from this, to see, which patients needed, to have treatment for a longer interval and which patients actually respond quite early. And I think this will really, really help us. And we should at least get the most science out of it that we can for this unfortunate interruption. I also want to mention one thing that I think that's really important, and that comes from the Optic X data. So from the phase 3 study, if patients recurred or had a flare or didn't respond to therapy, some of which were placebo that didn't respond, most were placebo, but a few patients that were in the treatment group in that randomized study didn't respond to the first go around. If they were retreated or got treatment for the first time because they had been in the placebo group, we have data on those patients. And we know that the adverse event profile is not different in those patients. And that's really important because certainly if we're thinking about stopping and starting and treatment interruption, we don't know. Without that, we wouldn't necessarily know, but we know that there are patients that have gotten 2 cycles of teprotumumab, of the 8 treatments, and the adverse event profile doesn't look very different. And also we see that they still have good effects. So it's really exciting to see if patients didn't get it early on, but got it later, they do well. And then also patients that got it the first time, they got it the second time, that there's a percentage of those that really respond well. And then the last group is those that did get it, did well, and then recurred or had a flare, that they respond to a second treatment. So that tells me that we have lots of different windows, and I'm not as concerned about that playing a role, that it will make it less effective or anything like that, because our data that we have so far, and we're trying to get more data, but what we have so far suggests that the best thing to do is going to be resuming it. And that I'm not as concerned that that is going to hinder the long-term effect of the medication. Now, I don't know because I only have this one patient who's interrupted therapy, but certainly that data points that way. Then the last question is, how soon will we have access to treatment? This is a great question, and I think this is going to be discussed by others discussing the treatment interruption in general. As I said, there's restrictions on what the company can do. So anytime they're increasing production, they have to go through the FDA, and that has to be approved for a larger manufacturing production time. So they're trying to do that. They're really working on using that one manufacturing slot that they have to have increased production, but it's something that has to be approved, and they can't go ahead until that's safe, until the FDA approves that. So I think it's going to be discussed, but I would certainly encourage patients. I talk to my patients about this, to contact some of the people that are listed. I think Susan is going to mention it at the end, or maybe Sara will, but you can be an advocate for yourself. Okay. The more people understand that this is a life-altering disease, the better chance we have of being able to do what Susan said, where we can actually have vaccine, which we definitely want to have that, but also help take care of your eyes, because I think people need to understand how much this alters patients' lives. As a physician who treats it, it's very close to my heart because I see so many patients going through this. And so I really want to have the best medication treatment options that I can for patients. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wester, and we will go ahead and let you go to get back to your patient. Thank you for joining us tonight. All right, I will go ahead and have Layla turn her camera on and unmute herself. And let's see here. I think we've got an extra screen up there somehow. So if my colleague Erin can see. Oh, there we go. All right. Sorry about that. Maybe it was just on my screen that I could see that. I apologize. But I'm here today joined by Layla Lohmann. Layla is a thyroid eye disease patient advocate. She actually herself is a dentist and she lives in Dallas, Texas. And so we're grateful to have Layla here tonight with us. And I'm just going to kind of ask her questions a little bit about her journey with thyroid eye disease. Dr. Wester didn't go too much into that because she knew Layla was going to be talking about it. And then I'm also going to talk with her about how she's feeling about this shortage, what her physicians have recommended to her. So, Layla, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So just to get started, you have a little bit more of an interesting story. I've talked to a lot of patients. When were you first diagnosed with thyroid eye disease?
I was first diagnosed with Graves' disease and subsequently thyroid eye disease in 1998, which, let me give you a time frame. I may look young, but I'm 36 years old. And so I was diagnosed when I was 12 years old. So I've been battling it for almost 2 decades plus. So it was a pretty big factor when I was younger. And then I had a thyroidectomy in 2000, at which my thyroid eye disease was pretty stable, and it was stabilized all the way until I became pregnant at 30.
Okay. So that's what I kind of want to talk to you about then. So you said you'd pretty much been stable. So what happened with your symptoms when you got pregnant?
So when I got pregnant, obviously with my thyroid condition, during pregnancy, they have to up your dose of your levothyroxine or your thyroid medicine. And so I didn't notice any factors until my second trimester, where I started having more pain in my eyes, at which point they became more proptotic. Then I found an ocular plastic surgeon to help deal with what I was dealing with. And then about my third trimester, or ending my second trimester, I was having double vision. I was having, my eyes never fully closed. So I always had like whites of my eyes always open. So I actually had to get my tear ducts plugged in dental school because it was so bad where it was hard. But then it started getting double vision, pain, which made my pregnancy more high risk. And then it came to the point where I could no longer, I was seeing double vision straight on. So it was affecting everything. So they actually ended up having to take my son at 35 weeks and 35 weeks and 5 days, because they were concerned about losing vision and losing issues with my eyes. So that was the first pregnancy.
Okay. And so how did they treat you? Did they give you any other treatment? Did you go through steroids or anything like
Yeah.
that?
They gave me steroids, but I was trying to limit that because I didn't want it to cross the placental barrier. So, I was trying to be hero / oh, it's fine. Like, I'm good. So yeah, they treated it with all those types of things. And then when they took my son, the symptoms lessened, but didn't go away. So then he treated me with, I was on steroids, like almost 50 to 60 grams a day. And then I was like, I don't want to get that hump and all these other problems with steroids. Then we discussed orbital decompression, but it could cause blindness. And, with my job, I just said, let's watch it. So then we did that for the last 5 years, is just watching, managing.
Yeah. Okay. So then I think, so you decided to have another baby. These really awful symptoms reemerged. I think that baby was also born prematurely as well due to that.
Correct.
So when were you able to actually get this new FDA-approved treatment?
So in July of 2020, my eye doctor knew I wanted to be conservative in general, just because he's been watching and managing me. And also, I didn't realize thyroid eye disease caused most of like my pain and discomfort around my eye. I just thought, I'm tired, I'm a mom and I'm a dentist and I'm a wife. So I didn't really connect them until actually I got to Pezza, which I can talk about afterwards. But in July of 2020, he had said that there's a fast track approved non-invasive way to treat thyroid eye disease, because the only way to treat it before with him was orbital decompression, which he decided I wasn't the best candidate for. And so we were just managing, and he was like, I think this is exactly what you have been needing and you've been waiting for, to do something non-invasively. And so we had to go through all this approval process. So it took months to even get approved for it. Talking to our insurance companies, am I on an active phase? I mean, there were so many documentations. So I didn't even get my first treatment till November of 2020.
Okay. So in total, before you were disrupted, how many treatments did you have?
4.
And what do you feel like happened with your symptoms? Were things improving?
Yes. So after the first and second treatment, I don't know if it was psychosomatic, mind over matter, but I was like, I feel better. I don't know. But I went to my doctor and he said, I don't see much improvement. So it was just me. But after the third treatment, I noticed that I was getting less dry eyes, less redness. And that was really important just in my profession. And then he said, between third, fourth, and fifth, you start noticing a lot more better resolving issues. And after my fourth one, I've noticed that my double vision has actually decreased. So I usually had double vision like right there, you'd be double. But now I have to go a little bit further and now you're double. So it's improved my double vision. It's improved my pain around my eye, my headaches around my eye, and my redness. So it's improved my quality of life, which is why this is frustrating.
Yeah, so let's talk then a little bit about that. You're experiencing the shortage as many other people are. What have your clinicians, your physicians been telling you that you should maybe do to manage these symptoms, if anything?
So right now he's just asking kind of where I'm at on the pain scale and double vision side. So I'm not at a super active phase right now. So we are actually just watching and managing. And if a symptom happens, I call him and tell him what's going on. He has advised me, because the science person in me believes that you should, and this goes on to what you were going to talk about later, but the science person in me believes that you shouldn't stop treatment on people who are going through issues that can cause adverse effects and or blindness in some cases. And so I was telling him I'm very frustrated, because if you disrupt my treatment, my doctor brain kicks in saying, well, then I'm not getting the full dose, which I really appreciate Dr. Wester, because she answered a lot of my questions in general of, does the timing matter? This is going to provide a lot of good science data, but not patient, help.
Yeah.
So he told me to go ahead and finish the treatments when provided, because I was asking him, do I stop? Do I start over? Do I call my insurance company? I mean, it's every question that patients are just asking. And he was like, ooh, I can't answer those. But he just told me, let's do this. When they come back, finish your treatment. At which point I said, my insurance says it stops at July. And he was like, we'll talk about that when it gets back. And then we will see what it looks like. If we see that your symptoms are resolving and you're having benefits from it, we're actually going to just let you coast and see where we go. If we see that it's re-emerging and happening again, then we may talk to your insurance company and or BioHorizons or, our reps to say, would they benefit from an additional X amount of dosages? So really it's a holding pattern currently at my state, because I actually I'm benefiting from it. So I'm not going backwards right now.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up then kind of with a final question, and that is, why are you lending your voice to us tonight? And what would be your message for Some of the people, again, Dr. Wester said this wasn't a decision that was made by the company to just stop manufacturing. Of course, we know it was government mandated, but what might you say um, to people who are going to be making these decisions that might be able to increase the manufacturing capacity and those sort of things? Like, what is your message as a patient?
My message as a patient is I would like policymakers to understand that this is a very serious condition that's more common than people think. We may not talk about it because we're going through our day-to-day life just living it, because there was no non-invasive way to treat this disease before, and getting those surgeries approved through insurance was very hard in general. So a lot of us were on a stagnant slope of just, we got to coast. But now that this drug has come in, they need to understand that quality of life matters too. I truly believe in the vaccine. I've actually been vaccinated because I'm 12 inches away from a patient. And so I believe that those are very important, but I think you should be able to do it together. I don't think you should stop 100% of affecting thousands of people's quality of life in order to say, by the way, here's your vaccine. You're going to survive the pandemic, but you're blind. So, I'm not saying that's that extreme, but it could be on certain people. And how are they going to be able to determine that your quality of life matters more than this other person who may or may not want the vaccine? Again, politics aside, we can't force people to do this vaccine. We should have it available for the Americans who want it, but there's patients who need this medicine, and they need to allow them to manufacture it to provide it for us because they're disrupting our health.
It's definitely a delicate balance, but we appreciate you lending your voice to us. I'm sure we'll probably continue to try to elevate your particular story and those of some that are on the webinar as well. And so I think actually my colleague will be pushing out another message to everybody on the webinar with a place where they can go in and share your personal thyroid eye disease story. So Layla, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, and we are next going to hear from Dr. Robert Popovian. So if Dr. Popovian will want to start his camera, we'll go ahead and let him take it from here.
Hi, Susan. How are you?
Great.
Thank you for having me. This has been a fascinating discussion because I really do think it's a balancing act. And we're in a pandemic, and we're trying to do the best as a country to serve all needs and all patients. And unfortunately, there are situations that get in the way that is unanticipated. So let me step back and talk about it. And this is why I think as policymakers and as patient advocates, as clinicians, and anyone in between, when we talk about biopharmaceutical innovation, we truly always point to discovery, development, access of these medicines. But one thing that is commonly not talked about and sort of not paid attention to as much is the manufacturing part, which to me is the most important thing, because if you don't have a manufacturing capability or manufacturing becomes an issue, you cannot have the access to the medicines. And hence, it's something that we need to pay more attention to as a country, as policymakers, as manufacturers, as patients, as providers, and everybody else in between. Disruption of manufacturing is nothing new. It's happened multiple times over the years, and it's primarily been because of natural causes. I mean, going back in 2017 when Hurricane Irma and Maria devastated the island of Puerto Rico, it caused significant impact on supply of certain drugs. There are 13 drugs in the US that were specifically only manufactured in the island. And those drugs were hampered significantly, and the FDA had to step in, and the manufacturers working together to quickly turn that around and be able to get the process going to make sure that those drugs that were being hampered with regards to supply get back online. And that's the most important thing. This is something that it's not a simple thing to turn around. In fact, people don't realize, and Dr. Wester actually pointed to and talked about it, and it just doesn't apply to biologics. It applies to almost anything that is manufactured as biopharmaceutical or pharmaceutical, a small molecule even. It takes time for the process to go through the FDA for approval of manufacturing facilities, for new lines to come on board. So it's not something that is instantaneous. So let me give you one specific example of a vaccine that I'm very familiar with. A single dose of vaccine for pneumococcal infection takes 2.5 years. There's a collaboration of up to 1,700 researchers, engineers, and manufacturing experts, more than 400 raw materials and 678 quality controls and 581 steps to just manufacture one dose of that vaccine. So it's a complex issue, and it becomes even more complex, as Dr. West pointed out, that we're talking now biologic. Now, so we're in the middle of a pandemic, and frankly, it's something that by the way, Horizon is not unique of any other manufacturer or any other pharmaceutical industry, large and small. They all depend on contract manufacturing. So this is nothing new or out of norm that companies go to contract facilities for manufacturing purposes. So at this point, we're in the middle of pandemic. The Defense Act that you alluded to the Department of Defense has stepped in and required that the contract manufacturer provide the facility for the production of the COVID-19 vaccine. And I agree with Layla. It's sort of like we need to walk and eat our cake too at the same time, chew gum at the same time. And we probably should have done a better job. The Department of Defense should have recognized that up front. But the manufacturer, my understanding is doing everything. It just takes time and is working through with the FDA to be able to get additional lines going on, and also has contacted other facilities for manufacturing purposes. But it's a process, and I'm certain that the FDA and the manufacturer are putting all of their resources behind to get this going as quickly as possible, because they do realize that there are individuals like Layla and other patients who are waiting for these treatments to come on board and be accessible. So there are no bad actors here. It is just an unfortunate situation that we're in as globally with this pandemic. And I've looked at all of the data and reviewed it, and there's nothing more than the manufacturer Horizon has been doing, that they have been doing and continue to do, to be able to expedite this situation. And we're at a time that choices had to be made, and this is where we are. But manufacturing shortages is nothing new, and it has happened in the past with natural disasters, like I alluded to in Puerto Rico with the hurricanes.
That's great, Robert. When you and I had spoken, we had talked, I think you had used the example of, it's not just like following a recipe on the back of a cake box. You put one egg in, you put a quarter cup of oil in, you put a cup of water, and then you mix it up and you put it in the oven, and voila, you have a cake. So can you kind of talk just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a simple recipe. It actually takes time for it to manufacture. And that's why I was talking about that vaccine development. It takes 2.5 years to manufacture a single dose, and so many steps that have to go through, so much raw material, so many people involved in it. It's not as simple as putting everything together, changing a line, and then starting to manufacture something different. There's a lot of quality control that needs to happen. There's a lot of approvals have to happen from FDA's standpoint. And those are necessary things to do, because over the years, we found out that those steps are necessary to make sure that there's a checks and balances of the medicines that patients get are safe and effective. Because the last thing you want to do as a patient, as a provider, and as a manufacturer is to give the patient something that's substandard. And because not only will not help the patient, you most likely will end up hurting the patient.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so it's so important that even though this is a frustrating process, and I know patients can feel very impatient right now and not understanding why they don't have access, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you said there are no bad actors here. Everybody is trying to do what they can to minimize this drug shortage. But because of some of these processes that have to be gone through, it is just going to require a little bit more patience.
And it's very necessary processes, right? Because the most important thing is that when the patient gets that medicine, we want to make sure that it's 100% effective and safe. Nothing has been shortchanged for that patient.
Absolutely. And it's just a reminder for everybody in the chat box, there is a link to that frequently asked questions document from Horizon that they've made available on their website that you can get a little bit more information about this. So I think that was an excellent explanation of how drug shortages happen. I know sometimes we hear about it on the news, but we're not always exactly sure about what causes. So you gave us two examples, natural disasters and a global pandemic. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Robert. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks. So for the last portion of tonight's webinar, I'm going to ask my colleague Sara if she will come on the screen and join us.
Hi, Susan.
Hey, Sara. And then I am going to actually put up a couple of slides that Sara has that she would like to share with everybody here. Sara is our co-host from Prevent Blindness, another great organization that we have been working pretty closely with on this drug shortage issue. So Sara, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of background about advocacy?
Sure. Thanks, Susan. So I'm happy to be here to talk about just, what you all can do while the decisions are being made at the FDA. The Vision Health Advocacy Coalition has been really great with partnering with us to help get some of the information that's out to, that patients need out to all of you and to policymakers to really encourage everybody to, to use the platforms that we have available to and make sure that this drug shortage and how it's affecting you is heard by people who are making some of these decisions. And really, that's exactly what advocacy is. It's really just using the voice that you have to be able to encourage the people at the FDA who are making some of these decisions. And, as we've heard from the presenters, from Dr. Wester and then also from Robert, there are decisions that need to be made by the FDA to ensure that the products that are being manufactured are safe and effective. That's absolutely important. We also, want to make sure that the vaccine is moving forward. All of us want to see this end, but we also want to make sure that patients who need medically necessary treatments for their quality of life are also receiving access to those treatments. So what you all can do is to reach out directly to the FDA to be able to let them know, why they should be making the decisions on your behalf. Really, I think that especially these days, and I know myself, being in the advocacy space for quite a long time now, it can really feel like you're just kind of, banging your fists against a wall and nobody's really hearing anything. And it can be a very long and slow process. It definitely requires a lot of patience and a lot of fortitude to be an advocate. But I want to stress that it's so incredibly important. I think it's probably noteworthy to mention that part of the reason the FDA fast-tracked approval for this drug is because they understood how essential and how vital it is for patients to be able to receive this treatment. And they understood the quality of life impacts that it has. And they also understood that, the costs and, associated with surgeries and trying multiple treatments over and over again was really just prolonging the inevitable. And so I think, using your voice to reach out to the FDA about this and letting them know how this is affecting you is of critical importance. I think advocacy also, as I mentioned, demonstrates that there is a burden with this disease and, it might not always be understood. I think the FDA certainly knows about the shortage and what's going on, but they might not understand how this is affecting you. And it might seem like you're saying things over and over again, but I will also mention too that you have no idea really, who that you're talking to is hearing something for the first time. I think that's an especially important point to keep in mind when you're advocating and when you're using your voice to help influence some of these decisions, is that even though they, might still need to stick to the decisions that they're supposed to make with, safe and effective treatments, they might not fully understand how this treatment is affecting you and how this shortage is affecting you. So that's incredibly important and a good reason to use your voice to advocate to the FDA. It also helps to raise awareness about the shortage. Like I said, the FDA certainly knows that this is going on, but other people in your community might not know. I've heard from other patients who have reached out to their providers And providers are starting to hear about this shortage too, and they might not be fully aware of it, and they might not fully understand just the entire issue itself. So you're not only raising awareness about the issue to the FDA, but you're also raising awareness to your community about this shortage and how it's affecting you in your life. I think also something important to note with advocacy is that you can have an influence in the decision-making process. Like I said, the FDA made this decision about this treatment because they understood just how impactful and how powerful it is for patients. You can use your experience, as a silver lining to help make some of these decisions and to hopefully help persuade the FDA to move forward on allowing this shortage to end and getting the treatments that you all need to continue on your way toward healthy eyesight. I think another aspect of advocacy that's important to remember as you consider undertaking some of this and raising your voice is that you can also gather information to help affect change. Right now, we are encouraging patients to reach out to the FDA specifically about this, as the decision is right now in their hands. But at some point, and if it turns out to be this way, you might need to reach out to your members of Congress to let them know that this is happening and that there is a drug shortage that you are facing and that it is affecting your health. It is really important if you do reach out to the FDA and they do respond back to you to have that information so that you can adequately affect change and help make some of these decisions too. Members of Congress are obviously very overwhelmed with quite a bit right now. So it really helps you and your case, and it helps them to be able to understand exactly what the problem is and know how to help you out with it. I think it's also important to advocate for your own healthcare and your own needs and your treatments. I know it can be exhausting. Everybody here is very, very busy. We're all going through a pandemic. Everybody has families and professions and hobbies that they want to get to, but it really is essential to be able to advocate for yourself. And one thing I always tell my advocates here with Prevent Blindness when we're speaking about a bunch of different programs that we're advocating for, if no one else does, who will? So it really is important to be able to take that upon yourself to be able to advocate for yourself and your own health needs. Next slide. So like I said, Vision Health Advocacy Coalition has been working, Prevent Blindness has been working with the coalition to put together some resources that patients can use to reach out to the FDA. It's incredibly simple to be able to do that. There is a letter desk on the Vision Health Advocacy Coalition website, as well as the Prevent Blindness website, where you can send a message directly to the FDA and the decision makers who are highly involved with this process. So you can input your information. As you can see, there is a pre-populated message that will be sent to the FDA, as well as your contact information. We highly encourage everybody who is on this webinar to, if you have not already done so, thank you to those who have, to reach out to the FDA and continue to stay involved with this campaign as it moves forward. Hopefully it will come to an end rather quickly, but while it is still ongoing, we highly recommend and ask you to take part in this campaign and help to notify the FDA about the things that you're going through.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. That's excellent. And my colleague also just pushed out the link actually in the chat box for that letter desk. But all of the links that you've received here tonight, it's okay if you weren't able to click on them. We're going to be sending everybody a follow-up email tomorrow with a lot of the information that was discussed here tonight. So that pretty much wraps it up for tonight. I want to thank everybody who was able to join us, to Dr. Wester for stepping out of the OR to really, I think, answer a lot of the questions. I saw all the questions that came in beforehand that were submitted during registration, and I wanted to make sure that Dr. Wester saw those so she could try to answer as many of them as possible. Again, we urge you to stay in contact with your physician regarding when you might be able to restart therapy and what they might do in order to manage the disease as it is right now. And again, just refer you to the frequently asked question document from the manufacturer, which has a little bit more information as well. And knowing that we are all working as hard as we can to try to mitigate the shortage. We want everybody to be able to have access to the therapy that their doctor has prescribed to them. And we also want to make sure that we are getting the vaccine to every single person who wants the vaccine. So we really appreciate everybody joining us today and look forward to connecting with you over email tomorrow. Hope everybody has a great evening. Thank you.